Welcome to YouTooSpain Live. This week, I'm very happy to say I'll be joined once again by our good friend Andrew Hesselden from the 180 Days in Spain campaign. We'll be chewing the cud about how the campaign is going, whether the latest UK government has shown any signs of support, and what effect we think the new housing plan and the proposed tax or ban on foreign property purchases will have on Brits and especially his fellow campaigners. So join us with questions and comments over there on the live chat or in the comments below if you're watching afterwards, because you are a part of this too. You are very welcome to YouTooSpain. Run the theme music and let's dance, everybody. Yeah, let's do it. Here we go. Here we go. Oh yeah, that's good, and it's very groovy. So, speaking of groovy, let's meet my wonderful guest for today. It's Andrew Hesselden from 180 Days in Spain. Hola!
Hello, hola.
How are you doing this morning?
I'm very good, thank you. And yourself?
Yeah, pretty good. Well, it's lovely down here. You're in the UK, I believe, at the moment.
Yes,
where you live for part of the year.
Yes, I'm in lovely sunny London today, and it's a glorious sunny morning, which makes a change.
All right, so you've not got the storm anymore. Has that passed over you?
Oh no, that's for the north. The north.
Ah, yeah.
It was a bit gusty briefly, but you know, nothing too bad for us tough southerners here, you see.
That's good. It looks like Ireland's taking the brunt of it, which is a shame. All my old friends there are looking at broken trees and things that are blown away. Lots of trampolines have been blowing from people's back gardens.
I saw in Scotland there was some shocking pictures of wind blowing everything everywhere. So.
And where I used to live in County Kerry, it's all built on turf or peat, so the tree roots it doesn't snap the trees, but the whole thing comes up with the roots because it's just such soft soil. So that's the damage that you get mostly. So anyway, it's great to have you back on the show, and
thank you.
You're very welcome. Let's just see who's on the live chat right at the moment. Jed Tierney says, "Hope you're wearing a kilt today, Skatz." Is it Burns night tonight? Yeah, the 25th.
It must be.
I'm not. Yeah, I'm not actually wearing a kilt. I was thinking it's St Andrew's Day, but it's not. That's another month, isn't it? But Jed says, "Can you bring us up to date on how you got on at the hospital this week?" I can do. But what I'm going to do is suggest that you watch the video on Still Alive and subscribe to that, because it tells you absolutely everything and it gives you a little build up to it. So I'm going to keep you guessing, but I'm still alive and I'm here. So there's a hint to how it went. So Paul Cook says, "Good morning, Skatz and Andrew." And Jen says she's off out to breakfast with her grandsons in the UK, popping in to say thanks to Chris after my visa arrived from London BLS within 9 working days of applying. That's good going. It's just good to see that.
Is that how quick it's happening these days?
It can be as soon as, I think 7 days was the very quickest that Chris has logged in, but you know, it can take weeks. They guarantee it within, I don't know what the guarantee is. Maybe it's 3 months, but it's never that long.
I remember at one point they were saying like 8 months or so, but that was a while ago.
That was a while ago, and I think that was before BLS took over from the consulates. So they seem to have made a big difference. Even though, you know, I'd prefer the consulates to be handling it in a way. I've always been not in favour of, you know, farming it out to other companies, because private companies can do their own thing. So yeah, but I'm a socialist at heart, so you know, keep it on board. Oh, Bill Anderson's on there from Mihas. Good morning to you. I was on his radio show on Expat Radio yesterday morning, so it's lovely to have you here. And he sent me a link actually to he's done it as a podcast as well, so there's a video podcast of the actual show that's coming out. And if you have a look somewhere at on Facebook, I'll be sharing that so you can watch it yourselves. There we go. If you're joining us, give us a wave and say hello. I know there are lots of people watching already, but you've not given us a wave yet. So do that and let us know that you're online. And you can start asking questions anytime you like. I'll keep on checking as much as I can on the live chat. As long as the questions don't go by in a rush, then we'll get through everybody. So, first of all, I think it's worth clarifying what the 180 Days in Spain campaign is all about. Because I remember you saying on the last show that you were here that the title can be a bit of a source of confusion. So dispel that for us, Andrew, relatively briefly before we dive into the questions.
Absolutely. So it's a campaign to help people who live half of the year in Spain and half of the year in the UK, who are doing so entirely lawfully before Brexit. But due to Brexit, now have problems because they were unable to register, or their registration lapsed, or something like that, or they were not registered in the first place because they were never required to. So it's asking for two things. We're wanting to improve travel mobility for all Brits, but we're also wanting to ensure that everybody who is living part year in one place are protected in a way very similar to all the Brits who were protected living in the whole year round. So essentially a similar kind of level of small agreement of protection for everybody who's there before Brexit. So we try to, it's about the people, not the property. So it's about recognising that people were living in Spain as a EU citizen, not necessarily because they own property or real estate.
Can I just, I'll just pause you a second. I'll just pause you for a second. Some of the sound quality has been kind of going in and out a little bit, so I'm missing some words. But have you got any sort of notifications on or any other programs running on your machine? Because that can
have a look.
Cause that. We'll just sort that out. Yeah, so, any applications that might be running in the background. Anything with a dot underneath it. I've got to close that one as well for myself.
Close a few things down.
Yeah, lovely. I can hear you clearly now.
Is that working better?
That's well, I can certainly hear you better. Yeah. Yeah, your screen is occasionally doing something, but I think that's because you're closing things down and its signals are going through.
It is, yes. I'm going to quit a few things like Dropbox and stuff that are synchronizing, so that might solve the problem.
Brilliant. Yes, we should have sorted this.
That's usually the culprit.
Yeah. Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. We should have sorted it out before the show, but we were both
it's
late
early
getting
in the
up.
morning.
It is.
I mean, it's like,
Sorry about that. You were saying we should do the show in the afternoon, but
that's all right.
Everybody's too busy. But there we go. I don't like it having to get up every Saturday morning so early. I have to be up sort of several hours just
to make sure. Give me a shout if it happens again.
Will do.
And we'll fix it.
Yeah, so hopefully everybody got that. And El Davido said, yes, it's echoing.
Should I just run through that again? Would that be helpful?
Yes, why not? Yeah.
Okay. So the 180 Days in Spain campaign is to help people who we call part-year residents, people who are living entirely lawfully before Brexit for half of the year in the UK and Spain, half the year in each, but were perhaps not protected by the withdrawal agreement. We're asking for two things. One, to protect people in that situation in a similar kind of way to how people who were living in Spain all year round before Brexit were protected, and secondly, to help everybody who travels frequently to Spain, who's perhaps frustrated by the post-Brexit arrangements, and it's to put pressure on the British government to realise that mobility matters and that people want solutions, whatever those solutions may eventually be.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. That's a good. I saw your post on Facebook group yesterday about the about the podcast that's just been published that you've recorded back in November, actually, and you spoke under the title of Saving Freedom of Movement to Get Across the Asymmetrical Nature of the Visitor Travel Arrangement, which I thought was a really concise way of describing, I guess, the key aim of the campaign. Really.
Yes, that's another campaign I run, really, because so many of us recognise that the problem is the loss of freedom of movement. That's the crux of it, and it's leaving the single market, leaving the EU. And so that has a much wider following because it helps people in a much wider way, includes work rights and all that kind of thing as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And how many members have you got? Is it all just done on the Facebook group?
Well, the Save Freedom of Movement is done is really just done on Twitter / Blue Sky. So I think at last check that had about 8,000 to 10,000 followers across the two platforms. And then the 180 Days in Spain campaign, we've got 8,000 members now, and we had 200 join last week. And then in France, we have a similar campaign called France Visa Free. It's not one I run, but my colleague Stephen runs that. And they have just over 5,000 members, I think.
Mm-hmm.
We have one in Greece, which is about 1,500. We have the same in Cyprus, about 1,500. And we've got smaller ones in Germany and Italy as well. But Spain is by far the biggest, and you know, like France, the Spain and France are the two active ones.
Yeah, brilliant. And how do you join and what do you have to do as part of the campaign?
So you head to Facebook. I think actually in the description of this YouTube live stream at the top, you kindly popped a link.
I have.
And to go to Facebook and search for 180, the numbers 180 days in Spain, then people can join. And we everybody's welcome to join, but we encourage people to join only if they really want to get involved, because we're not like the normal kind of Facebook group where everybody argues. We try not to do that, and we focus on action. So people who join actually want to write letters, they want to go and meet their MP in the UK. They might even want to go and meet a politician in Spain somewhere as well. That's even better. So, so yeah.
Yeah, it's good to see. And I'll just having a look at the questions on the live chat. They say the sound is much better now. That's good. Gary says, morning all. Why can't we have 6 months all at the same time? That is part of the question, isn't it?
Well, I think that's a very good point, Gary, and a lot of people feel the same way as you. That isn't the headline of what we're about, actually, because if we say we want 6 months, people are very quick to point out that you could never have 6 months before Brexit because you were meant to register after 90 days. So, and yes, we understand that. A lot of our members want 6 months, but are quite happy to go away a bit in between. And basically, they want to be treated as lawfully residing in two places, just as they were before Brexit. So, so yes, that would be an outcome of it.
Yeah,
it isn't what we lead with because it's yeah. Anyway,
yeah.
Carry on.
Hence the confusion some people have with the title of the campaign, because it sounds like that's what you want and that's all you want, you know. But
that's right. Yes, I think basically we are to clarify and talk to that. The reason we call it 180 days in Spain is because we want to make sure that people are able to spend the full 180 days in Spain and not have that reduced by visits to other Schengen countries. So, for example, if you went skiing in Switzerland for a week, or your employer sent you to Germany to a staff conference for a week, then all of those days since Brexit would then reduce off the 180 days you could spend in Spain. So a lot of people say, but you've already got 2 times 90 days. What are you complaining about? Well, it's really quite serious, because that 180 days, whereas before you could have had that in Spain and then gone to France if you wanted to, as for another 180 days or whatever. Now you get that reduced from the Schengen allowance, which is now incredibly shared between 29 different countries.
Yeah, of course.
So it was 26. Yeah, it keeps getting back, because
Bulgaria
joined and Romania joined.
Bulgaria was the other. Yeah, that's only recent. So
was 26 when Brexit happened, and it's only set to increase because I think Cyprus is supposed to join later this year.
Yes. No doubt
So
we'll
it'll be
have no doubt we'll have Ukraine eventually, depending on the circumstances.
well,
over there.
exactly.
Mark is saying, good morning all. We're still waiting for our visas from BLS Manchester to Alicante, starting week 12 on Monday. Ouch. Any advice? And Kev, the Argonaut, says, I hear Manchester has been a disaster for many people on visa turnaround for the last few months. Not much that can be done, it seemed. Hope yours turns up soon. Yes, it's a matter of waiting. Unfortunately, patience is not easy when you've made all of your plans, and you may have bought your plane tickets or your ferry tickets and booked everything, and so yeah, frustrating. I appreciate it, and I'm an EU citizen. It was bad enough. We had to book the ferry from Ireland at least 6 months in advance because the ferry's shut down in October. And you can't get another one till April. And we had a dog to carry over as well. So we had to get a pet cabin. So you've got to be even more in advance to get one of those. So, yeah. And so it was kind of scary right up to the day. And then our car broke down as we got off the ferry and just put our plans into a terrible state.
Just what you need, isn't it?
Yeah. But I've heard worse stories. There's a couple from... I think they're from Holland or Germany, who came to move down here in Computer, and they crashed their car with dogs inside it, and they were taken to hospital, and the dogs were taken somewhere else, and so they didn't have a clue what was happening and couldn't do anything because they were stuck in hospital. So there's always somebody worse off than yourself, really. There you go.
There certainly is.
Jed Tierney says, I hear this a lot. They've done the 180-day rule because they hate the UK, British press. Oh, that's what the British press are saying, not you, Jed. Thank goodness for that. Yeah. I say, yeah.
We hear that a lot.
Yeah, the press have got a lot to answer for. But, I'm the media as well, and I put these shocking headlines up as well because we were talking before the show about being a slave to the algorithm. People don't see your videos unless you put some kind of headline that has all of the keywords in that people are searching for. So it's a shame that we're all forced to do that. And I had somebody...
That's so true. That's so true, because I've been asked by a number of journalists to tell people about the campaign. And I'm really particular about getting this right because I don't like it to be misrepresented because it just adds to the problem. And I work really hard, and I've got some of these articles have gone out. They're so perfect. They're so spot on. I've gone through it with a fine-tooth comb, and we've completely agreed on what it is. And you know what? It doesn't get shared at all because it's not controversial. There's nothing wrong with it. Nobody can find anything to object with it. And so nobody clicks like or shares or even argues with it. Whereas if the Daily Mail or the Express writes something like, British expats fuming about something, it goes miles.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think one of the best pieces of press, I never even spoke to them. I think it's in the Express or the Mail, and I never even gave them an interview. They just rehashed it from something else that I'd done. And this went miles. It's one of the best pieces of awareness things for the campaign we've ever had.
It's brilliant,
Crazy.
Isn't it? I mean, one of my latest videos, only a few months ago, I put it out, and it's my videos previously, and these are the ones I bring out on Wednesdays, which is all they're all much shorter than the live broadcasts, and therefore I can make them more punchy. And previously, my highest number of...
I like those. I'm a short video person, actually.
I think everybody is, yeah. Nobody's got the patience these days. And my highest viewing figures previously was something like 27,000. This one has now surpassed 38,000 and heading for 40. And it's the quickest one that's there. It's taken the other ones a year or two to get to the figures that they're at. But this one in 3 months went up to over 35,000 very quickly. And it's lovely to see when you open up the statistics and it just goes and the numbers add, and it's all just great for a YouTuber, but you also feel your soul draining away at the same speed. There you go.
I think it works both ways because I'm quite active on Twitter and Blue Sky, and And when I see some of the stats as to some of the thoughts that I put out, because I want people to start thinking a different way about mobility. And when I look at the things that really take off, sometimes it really pleases me because you can see that if you take away all the nasty opponent comments and stuff, and you think, God, this has really resonated with people, and it's quite incredible actually how many sensible people there actually are out there who really do champion, the good stuff.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
It works both ways, I think.
Yeah, and I've noticed how calm you are with absolutely everybody. When sometimes I try and just go straight in with knives out. There's especially comments like, especially with the housing plan, people saying, "Oh, it's all just political posturing," and that's all they write, and it's just such an end-all phrase. It's like mentioning the Nazis. Once you start mentioning them, then there's no conversation after that. It negates any debate and denies any possibility that there's even the nugget of a good idea or something worth debating in the whole housing plan, and that nothing will ever change.
That internet law, is it that everything ends in a reference to the Nazis or something like that? What's it called? I can't remember
now.
Somebody might know.
Yes, no, we've mentioned the N word now twice, and it's who knows.
We have, I know. And that didn't take long.
No,
it
didn't.
21 minutes.
Absolutely, yes. And now everybody on YouTube goes, "Oh no, now worried because the algorithm will pick up on that, and what's it going to do to the video?" So, no, there you go. But I think the housing plan, we'll talk about the housing plan in a bit, and it's too important an issue to make an assumption like that and to just distill it down into one phrase. And you just have to look at the cancellation of the whole golden visa program. Some people were saying, "Oh yeah, it's just political posturing," but that got through the process into law and ended up being more sweeping than the proposal, which was just to remove the property part of it, but they actually took it all away. And I think Spain means business with the housing proposals, and all sides of the political spectrum need to do something about it. So it would be dangerous to ignore them by saying Sanchez is just politically weak and he's just showing bravado to win the next election, because, well, maybe he is, but that's not all that's happening.
Well, a week or two ago, I was called up by LBC News Channel, and they wanted me to do an interview, and I had half an hour to prepare for it. And this news had just come out that day, and I thought, do I do it? Don't I do it? And anyway, I agreed to do it. And it's like a lot of reading quickly because all the news had only come out the night before. So I was vaguely aware of it all, and the hysteria was all over the news, but I needed to do a bit of quick swatting up. So it's about a 5-minute interview on that. It might still be there on catch up now.
Yeah. So. Right. Well, we've only answered the first question so far, and that's summarised the campaign. But so let's have an update about it, and we'll talk about the effect that the UK government has had on it afterwards. But tell us about the progress since we last saw you, and any action taken since we last spoke.
Okay, so first of all, progress on this kind of matter, we always expect to be really slow, because it's one of those slowly catchy monkey kind of things. We are hoping to contribute to a conversation, and I don't expect to ever wake up and suddenly find, our campaign has succeeded, because I think that we will wake up one day and all of a sudden there'll be an announcement about mobility, or we're joining the single market, or we're rejoining the EU, who knows, and that may well take over. But how do we get to that point? We get to that point by making sure we're talking about mobility, because if people are not talking about wanting to travel, wanting to live between two places or more, then it's very difficult for British politicians to see why this matters to people. So I'm really passionate about, I don't mind, if people want to scream at me online, I've got used to it now. I've got quite broad shoulders, and they can say they don't agree with this or they do agree with this. The fact that we're talking about it hopefully makes British politicians realise that this is something that they need to be looking at. By the same token, we know Spain has on several occasions although Spain gives out very mixed messages, if you're somebody who lives in Spain for part of the year, as we do, you get very mixed messages, because on the one hand you've got all these taxes coming, and then we're going to ban non-EU citizens and all of that kind of stuff. The next thing, you see encouraging news stories saying, you know, they're wanting to solve the 90 and 180-day problem, and they'd like the EU to do something about it. We get that every now and again, and some of this is the British press cycle whipping it up. But there's, you know, it doesn't come from nowhere. You know, there have been government spokespeople in Spain who've expressed an interest to deal with this. So I think it's really, so in terms of where we are campaign-wise, we are, if I step back and look at the bigger picture, we are moving in the right direction, undoubtedly. And the position we are in now in terms of public mood, the conversation about this, hugely improved. But since the change to the Labour government in, was it May this year? May last year? July?
I can't remember.
It's so long
it's
ago.
all a blur.
I think it was July. The new government changed a lot, because whereas we had been writing to mainly Conservative MPs and Conservative ministers for 4 years and getting very much not interested kind of responses back, we are, I would say, at least 50% of the letters we now get back from MPs, and our members are writing to MPs every week, over and over again. And at least 50% of the letters we get back are now very positive. So they're empathetic, they understand the issue, which we were never getting before. They see there's a problem, there is a willingness to solve the problem. Where we sometimes, if they just don't want to engage with the issue, they say unhelpful things like, we've pledged to not restore freedom of movement, at which point we have to say, well, hang on a moment, we're not asking you here to restore freedom of movement. We're suggesting things that could be done instead of that. So the things that we are suggesting, the solutions that we have, they don't cross any of the government's red lines. And the three main red lines are, they've said they're not rejoining the EU, they're not rejoining the single market, and they're never going to restore freedom of movement of people. So three crazy red lines that many of us wish they would just drop. But none of what we're asking for requires them to cross those. So you would think that Starmer's government would be all over these ideas. And I believe, well, I hope, I have various reasons to believe that in the background, conversations are happening. If you look at what they're doing with youth mobility, the shift in attitude towards that, it's something. They keep saying they won't consider it, but they clearly are considering it in the background. And it clearly is part of the reset talks. The question now is, can we get a wider mobility question into the reset talks? And would that help us in getting closer to the EU again? And, you know, heaven forbid, you know, could we actually ever rejoin the single market? It seems difficult to believe that right now, but I honestly think, you know, if you'd have asked me 3-4 years ago, would I be sitting here talking to you, still running this campaign, and would we have made as much progress as we have? Then no, I wouldn't have said that we would have done. So the change has been phenomenal, but to a casual observer who's not been following it, it doesn't look like things have changed, but they are changing.
That's good to hear.
That was a very long, waffly answer, wasn't it?
No, it's fine. I like a bit of thoroughness in my answers, and because you don't see it in the press. So there you go. Oh, Gig Guitar Man, great name, says, will Starmer ever support 180 days in his EU discussions? He seems to think this is just about freedom of movement, which is interesting after what you've said.
So somebody contacted me last week who knows a friend who knows somebody who knows Starmer, blah blah blah, who told me that Starmer is acutely aware of this 90 and 180 day issue. I think the problem is, if he talks too much, then it's assumed that something's happening. And I think that even if conversations are happening in the background, which they must be, then it prejudices their negotiation situation. And sadly, this does look a bit like, do you remember when people told Theresa May not to use EU citizens as bargaining chips. Sadly, it always comes down to people being used as bargaining chips, and I think the problem is we've got a British government who, well, certainly the last British government certainly didn't want to waste negotiation capital on British citizens. So I think that has changed, that has improved, and there's a willingness on the EU side as well as the UK side for things to change. But
Great.
we shall see.
Yes, yeah. Kev says 9180 must be even more solid now. Sanchez announced his measures to address the housing crisis. He's hardly going to make it more attractive for people to buy winter homes in Spain, in my humble opinion. Well, we shall see about that one, really.
Well, we keep seeing this come up, though, actually, Kevin, because the Balearic government has put out stuff in the past saying they didn't want non-residents to buy property on the islands. This story actually comes up every year. I think you always have to put it in context, because if you went looking for 9180-day stories if you search Google for Spain, Brits, EU 9180, you'd find just as many stories as there are this week about tax rises and banning people buying properties. So it's a bit of a balance. It's what's the flavour of the news this week. Yes,
that's the other thing that gets my videos high up in the rankings. Yeah, search for 9180. I've got several. I keep bringing one out every now and then because of the titles. There you go.
Well, and there are certain newspapers that are very guilty of doing that. I always see I call it SEO journalism, just search engine optimization. They want the rankings. They know people, and people search for 90/180 because they're trying to look for a calculator online, or they're trying to actually understand the rules. They're not always wanting to change them or anything. They're just literally wanting to look them up. So of course they want all their news stories to come up at the same time.
Exactly. Yeah. And
your video is Skatz.
Yeah. On my phone.
I know your game.
Know my little sneaky game. Yeah. So, Parrot Bebop 2 Flights, that's the best title of a best handle I've seen on this channel. Do you think this will have the opposite effect on Spanish house prices? Could the house prices boom as everyone rushes to buy before the new rules come in? I'd say possibly. It's a short-term thing. But I think the numbers of people, in terms of the percentages of people from outside the EU who are buying properties, it's, I don't know, something like 3%, I think was the figure that I read this morning. So it might not have as big effect.
4% last night when I was doing my research.
There you go, but it is a small percentage. Yeah, so it may not have much effect at all. We shall see. And David Tunmer says, morning Skatz. Best advice that Chris gave us, we were waiting. Oh, this is waiting for visa from Manchester, I think. While we were waiting, don't book anything until you get your visa. It's frustrating, but we've been here 6 months and having it large. Good. I've not heard that expression for a while. That's an old one, isn't it? The problem...
Who used to say that?
Having it large.
Sounds very Saturday morning TV, was it?
Yeah, possibly. Or Ali G or something like that. I think it's a 90s thing. Jed Tierney, the problem is things that are common sense don't necessarily make political sense. Yeah, common sense isn't a good thing to spout as a politician. Yeah. So, where were we? Oh, I tell you what, I saw the Sheffield for Europe post on your group a few days ago, and there was a bit of good news you said on there. The Home Office has announced changes to the EU settlement scheme. So this is people going the other way. That mean as many pre-settled status holders as possible will be automatically converted to settled status without the need for a further application. Is this going to help persuade Europe to pursue some kind of reciprocity?
Well, all of this kind of stuff is always very good, isn't it? I think it's worth pointing out here that a lot of people don't realise that the withdrawal agreement wasn't gospel. This is what's happening. The withdrawal agreement was a minimum baseline, for the countries were expected to follow. So the UK has certain obligations, and in return, Spain, France, etc., also have obligations. And so, from my point of view, it's incredibly encouraging to see that the British government has decided that everybody who was registered before Brexit, or or in the EU pre-settled, with EU pre-settled status, is automatically being given settled status once they've calculated they think they've got to 5 years. Now, this particular story that we shared via Sheffield in Europe, I think that's a reliable source, but I haven't actually been able to verify that yet. From the Home Office website or anything like that, but I'm sure that it's fine. So, but it is encouraging because it's hopefully a reduction in the kind of nonsense that EU citizens have to put up with in the UK. This is all good stuff. I mean, my view is that anybody abroad should be protected for life, because obviously that would help people in our position too, wouldn't it? Because if people were lawfully there before Brexit in Spain, then they could or should expect to be lawfully there in future, regardless of how much of the year they actually spend there in future. So that would be an ideal situation if we could ever get to the same kind of position with Spain.
Absolutely, yeah. Just before we continue, just want to mention that you may have noticed there's a QR code up in the corner, just up there. And if you've learnt something of value to you today, or you've enjoyed the show, or you've been entertained, then you can show your appreciation by scanning that code. Just put your phone camera pointed at it and click on the little yellow link. That'll get you to our GoFundMe page, where you can read about how to make a donation to support this channel and why it's a good idea, not just for me, but for you too. And thanks to all of you who've already shown your appreciation. It's very much appreciated in return. And if you're watching on a phone, which I believe about 50% of viewers are doing anyway, you won't be able to scan what's on the phone in any way possible. But there's a super link in the video description below that you can use, which has all the information about everything to do with this channel and me. And it's easy to find the donate or the GoFundMe button on there. There we go. And Kev says, got a dash, Skatz. Interesting. Sorry, we'll watch later. Viewings for my brother at 11. That's a funny word. Good luck with the campaign. Brilliant. Thanks, Kev. So let's talk about the UK government and the Starmer Reset, which is a phrase I love. I'm just imagining there's a reset button on the back of Sir Keir, which resets him to factory presets, but that's not what it's about. It's about a reset between the arrangements between the UK and Europe. So has dear old Sir Keir and his government managed to produce any forward motion that's helpful to the campaign? I think you've already talked a little bit about that.
Well, I think a lot of the people that I'm friends with and connected with are really very disappointed with what's happening. We don't think it goes far enough. But, let's not look a gift horse in the mouth. I mean, I try to be really positive about this. I mean, what we're seeing now would have never happened under the previous government. I mean, Sunak was starting to sort of have a little go at doing this, but not with any sort of real conviction. I think the main criticism we could make of the current government is they're not being open and transparent enough about what they're doing. They're not communicating, they're not talking to the actions. And I think there was an article out from Neil Kinnock. Everybody remember Neil Kinnock?
I do.
Former Labour leader, Lord Neil Kinnock, as I should give him his full title. He had an article out basically saying the same kind of thing, that he would like to see much more communication about what's going on. Because it sort of looked a little bit lackluster. I think the article, he was giving his support for Starmer, what he's doing, but kind of saying, come on, let's put a bit more sort of teeth into it, so to say.
Yeah.
So, and in terms of the reset, I mean, this is an interesting topic, and a few weeks ago, somebody pointed out on social media that reset means different things in different European languages. It's translated in French to it's translated to in French, German, Spanish differently, to whether it's about starting again at the beginning, or whether it's re-establishing the current situation, or whether it's going back to how things were beforehand. So in some languages, it's such as in German, you might think of reset as being going back to how things were before Brexit, which of course is not what Starmer means.
Yeah.
If you look at what reset tends to mean in English, it can also mean essentially re-establishing, reasserting what the current situation is. So resetting itself in English, it perhaps doesn't mean what all Europeans take from that word. So I think the mood we hear a lot of commentary from Brussels saying that the reset isn't going far enough, or that it's disappointing. And I can understand why they're saying that, because when they translate reset into their language, they're expecting much more of a going back to how things were, or starting at the beginning again. Whereas I think in English, Starmer is basically saying, I'm here. I want to reset the tension, reset the mood, but actually I'm not changing anything. And that seems to be his message. And obviously we wish he'd go a lot further on that.
So Kev is saying Starmer has just communicated last government's fault, 22 billion black hole. My father was a tool maker. That's interesting. That's
really unhelpful, isn't it?
Yeah. What do we get from that? There we go. Shall we get on?
So,
there's more to say about that, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots to say. I mean, in terms of, if you want to ask me, for example, could improvements to visa-free mobility be included in a UK-EU reset? Yes. We think this could be agreed EU-wide. We know when the withdrawal agreement was being negotiated back in 2018, 2019, that the EU offered to leave full freedom of movement on the table. They could have left freedom of movement in place for all Brits living in EU countries, or all Brits living anywhere, and vice versa. But the UK government didn't agree to that. They rejected that. When the TCA was being negotiated, if you go online and you look for the first draft, there is a first draft of it which included a mobility chapter. Now, it's a little bit vaguely worded, and it's quite hard to work out what the intention of this was, but it's perfectly possible to include mobility arrangements in that, which might not be freedom of movement. It might just be a visa waiver, and the visa waiver may or may not include work rights. And I think yes, it could be agreed EU-wide, and the precedent, the big thing that's changed recently that actually reiterates the fact that could happen is this youth mobility thing. So for anybody who's not up to speed with this, the UK government approached, I think, 7 countries to strike a bilateral deal with each one on youth mobility visas to match what they have with Australia and Canada and that kind of thing. And they already have an agreement like this with Iceland. And I think Spain and Germany were both keen to do this. They're really keen on this. And anyway, the EU, in the EU meaning Brussels, decided, hang on a moment, let's do this EU-wide. At which point then the whole thing kind of ground to a bit of a halt. And this was a really interesting move from the EU because the EU doesn't have competence over immigration requirements. So what I mean by that is up to 90 days, they work as a block for short stays. But when it goes beyond 90 days, the EU can't say to Spain, okay, Andrew wants to come in, you've got to let him in for 100 days. He wants to come for 100 days, because Spain doesn't have to let you in for any more than 90 days. The EU can't say more, can't stipulate more than 90 days. And so the fact that they've come up with this EU-wide proposal on youth mobility is really interesting, because the only way they can actually do that is by first getting a mandate from all the member states that actually give them the authority to go ahead with and negotiate this with the UK. So the very fact that is being proposed now by the EU is really encouraging, because it proves that the EU can act if they want to. So absolutely, I think this could be in a reset. And then yesterday, other things that are really positive. So I mean, we were talking about this PEM, the Pan-Euro-Mediterranean Convention, that was labelled as a customs agreement. So this was all over the news yesterday, and I think Starmer, half the news stories say that Starmer's rejected it, but the more accurate news stories tell the truth, which is that Starmer has said no for now. Which is in politics as good as saying yes, this is precisely what we intend to do in the future. So I mean, the fact that that's coming in, that could really reduce the tariffs. It's a bit of a no-brainer. It could reduce the tariffs on goods that cross borders by redefining what it means to be domestic. So at the moment, if something that the UK is selling has been entirely made in the UK, then it's tariff-free. But if it contains components that have been brought in from non-EU countries, it has to factor that in and then pay and then tariffs are due on that export from the UK or that import to the EU. But this Pan-Euro-Mediterranean customs union, it's been built. It's not really. It's similar to a customs union, but not really. This would mean that. More, I'm not an expert in this at all, but it would mean that things that have been made with components from outside the EU, more of those things could be considered to be UK made and therefore would have lower tariffs on them. So all of that's encouraging. And even though he's saying no for now, what that tells me is no, they're not doing this, but they're looking at something else. So who knows? Maybe they're looking at a single market arrangement again. I mean, that would just be wonderful. But they certainly wouldn't want to be telling us about that at the moment, I expect.
No. Yes, indeed. So,
and maybe that's a bit high in the sky still, that idea. It still feels a bit far away, but who knows?
Yes, we'll cross our fingers on that one. The Matt David says Starmer is AI. Interesting. And
it's possible, isn't it?
Yeah, these days you really can't tell. I mean, there's a program that I could have got. I got the free program, and tried it out briefly, where you can, especially for people who use Zoom and have got up too late in the morning to dress in a business suit, it can change your clothes into you wearing a business suit, so you can be just in your pajamas in front of the camera. You've just got to hope that the program doesn't shut down in the middle of a conversation with your boss, and suddenly you're in your pajamas or wearing nothing at all, which is even worse. So anyway, get back to something more serious.
AI really is incredible, isn't it? I was amazed. If I'm wanting to write something very quickly about our campaign or prepare, I can actually type into ChatGPT, tell me about the 180 Days in Spain campaign, and it can go off. It can look at what's on the web. It can read all the news stories, and it gives me something back, which is almost as if I'd written it myself. It's amazing what it does.
Yeah, and it's so, good if you use it in the right way. I mean, I know that some people just ask ChatGPT to write a whole passage or a whole book, and they put it out and it just sounds like ChatGPT, and I don't like it when it's pure like that, but I definitely use it for some of my scripts for the Wednesday videos, because I like to take bits from different articles, and it's a lot quicker to do it that way, because it can take me a whole day, because like you, I'm very picky when it comes to the language I use. So I grab all of the information. I'll let the computer do it for me, because it takes a short period of time, and then I can spend an hour tidying it up and putting it into my words and making it sound like me. And ChatGPT isn't always free of mistakes, so you have to go through and grab what's good.
Well, I think that's the way to use it, isn't it? I think some people try and use it at the end to tidy up their own work, but I think it's most useful at the beginning to do the first draft, to process all this information. And then, as you say, if you work for it, then the output on and out for an hour or so, you end up with something that's really, really good then.
That's it, yeah. And you can also take, I mean, I've got a website where I put articles and blogs, and usually they're the script of my videos. I've just used the script sometimes, but you can ask ChatGPT just to turn it into an article for you, and then you can plonk it on there, and then you make it look good with photographs and add your own little twist to it. Just so much quicker to use. And I've got so much of a workload if I don't do that, that I'm in the office sitting on my arse all day for 7 days a week, So, yeah, it's a good thing in some ways.
We've got lots of questions on here, haven't we?
Yeah. I'm just looking. You are using that at the moment, Skatz. There was a glitch and I saw you briefly in suspenders and a tutu. Yes. No, that thought is in everyone's heads now. And yeah, just keep it there for as long as you can. Yeah, Barry from Unitech is with us. He says, I can't unsee that now. Exactly. All it takes is one mention and it's around the world. So just before we get, because we've already gone for 50 minutes already and we don't want to go on all morning, but before we get onto the effect of Spain's housing crisis, which could be a huge subject, we'll try and get through it as quickly as we can, but I want to get it covered and get into the meat of it. But I do have some extra important information, a bit of promotion for you watchers before we continue. That's very relevant actually. It's about the current exchange rate between the UK pound and the euro, and also the US dollar. That's been fluctuating quite a lot because of the election. In fact, all currencies are, which means if you're planning to move or buy property in Spain in the future, and you're moving from a country with a different currency, and especially if you're transferring large amounts of money between countries, if you're buying a house, for example, the exchange rate makes a huge difference to how many euros end up in your pocket. And I'm always going on about fixing a forward rate, which means setting your rate now at the present rate, just even before, you do the deal, but you don't pay for the whole lot of money. You just pay a deposit. And you pay when you've sold your house, for example, in the UK, and you're transferring your money over to buy the house in Spain. And you can also set your regular pension to be kept at that fixed rate for a year or even two. So the company that I use and recommend, here we go, here's the plug, for quite a few good reasons, is Smart Currency Exchange. They were very good with me. And actually, let me just put their QR code up just for a few seconds, and there it is. I think you can also get to it through my SuperLink, and if you start an account with them, it's a no obligation free account, and you can get some free advice in your own personal broker, and they're experts on buying property and using those large amounts and avoiding bank charges as well. This is another thing that you might not consider when you're doing the exchange, because you might end up with a big bank charge from your Spanish bank when it arrives. So they can guarantee that that's not the case, because they have a deal with a bank in the UK and a bank in Spain that is tariff free on that. So anyway, that's one of the good things about them. Give it a try. They're very lovely and helpful. And by using that link, you'll actually be helping YouTooSpain as well as an affiliation there, and it won't cost you a penny. It's a win-win-win with a cherry on top. There you go. So let's just remove that for now, and let's come to the final and equally topical part of the show, because I've made 3 videos about this myself in the last week and a half. We covered the whole housing plan with Chris on the last live show last Saturday. There's this 100% tax, so-called, and finally the latest proposal of a ban on non-EU citizens who aren't resident here from buying property at all. So what's your take on it, Andrew?
So my take is this is yet another thing coming at people since Brexit. It's kind of one thing after another. I think people felt pressured into making rash decisions to move and relocate because they saw Brexit was coming along. I think in the immediate years afterwards, when they saw things that are not great, people are flooding to get visas and thinking about, I wish I'd gone sooner, or they wanted to go before the pandemic, and so they've now gone now with visas. And then we've had the golden visa things come along, hasn't it? Saying that they're closing the door on that. And now this. And I mean, the ban on non-resident foreigners buying property is something that seems to come up every year or so. I mean, it's not a new idea. And where I live in Spain, in Mallorca, it kind of comes up annually because the property prices are really high there. Locals find it hard to buy property, and in any area where these high density tourist areas. I mean, Mallorca isn't particularly high density, and it's only some very specific parts of the island. But where there is pressure, they need staff to support the tourist industry, and they need staff. The staff they don't want to pay the staff much money, so the staff need cheap housing as well. And it's kind of you can understand that the problem exists, but I think it's no different to the problems anywhere else in Europe. And when I hear politicians talking about blaming foreigners for things like property prices, it sounds rather like British politicians who blame foreigners for lack of provision in the NHS or housing problems in the UK. I mean, how many times do we hear the right-wing press saying, oh, it's foreigners that are the reason you can't see a GP, or it's foreigners that are taking all the council housing? And actually, although this is kind of aimed at a slightly different kind of demographic, it's just the same thing. It's blaming foreigners for decades of failed housing policy, or no housing policy. So I have a huge amount of sympathy for families who want to buy homes to live in, but this could be one of these measures that actually ends up hitting the wrong people, hitting the wrong people and not really helping the right people, if that makes sense. Because if you look, for example, at our members, I think it probably won't hit that many of them because they've already bought somewhere to live, or they already have somewhere to live. So these measures probably won't affect them immediately. But I think. but I think it's do people anyway, carry on.
yeah I was just going to say actually that Sanchez did specify something that wasn't mentioned in any of the press as far as I know. I think in some Spanish press they gave the sort of full speech of the housing plan and did the full list, but of course those aren't the populist articles. So
it's got 12 points.
Yeah, and when I read the article that was translated for me, there only seemed to be 10 points. But so I'm not sure how that worked out. But anyway, he did specify when he was talking about the 100% tax proposal. He did say before that, he said this is for stressed areas, which is i.e. where there are young people and low-waged, unable to find or afford housing, affordable housing, and none of that was mentioned in the British media. And in fact, none of the other 11 points were mentioned at all, really. And there are some good points he's making there, and aiming this at specific areas where the problem is. Then there's no use punishing people who are on urbanizations in the Costa del Sol, because those properties have been specifically built for tourists, and your low-wage people aren't going to be able to afford a 3-bedroom villa with a swimming pool in the garden. That's not the sort of property that needs to be built. It's the social housing that's missing.
And it's really interesting as well, because I thought actually on the face of it, it seems logical. Okay, so they, I mean, in terms of somebody moving to Spain, they're saying that you can only buy property without all these extra taxes if you're already resident, which would imply that you're expected to initially move, so get a visa and move, and then rent somewhere. Well, I can tell you that somebody who's planning on buying a £500,000 home is not going to think twice about sinking 10 or 20 grand in rent for 6 months just to get the residency. So I think actually it could end up pushing up the price of rent in these areas because people are still going to need to rent before they buy. And then there'll be even more pressure on rental properties. And I know in Mallorca, the shortage is on good quality rentals. It's certainly not on things to buy.
Yeah.
So it could really backfire. Actually, it's an interesting measure. I mean, personally, I hope it doesn't come in, because I don't think it's quite right. But who knows? It's a proposal, and it keeps coming up. So who knows? When you look in the context of the 12 points, though, that he's come up, as you say, there's some really good stuff on there. We've got things like rehabilitating vacant homes, rent guarantees. A lady in my campaign actually prepared a list of this, which is really helpful. Tax breaks for people who rent at affordable prices, new seasonal rental rules, taxing tourist rentals, putting VAT on, all that kind of stuff. All this stuff, actually, it kind of makes sense, but it's as a bigger picture. But this very specific issue on taxing non-EU citizens, well, that's only going to, as you say, there's only 4% of the sales were to non-EU citizens. Was that last year? So
yeah, 2024.
Whether the measure would really... And I remember reading something in Mallorca. It was something like, I may have got these numbers slightly the wrong way around, but it was something like 200 individuals own more than 50 properties each on the island. Now, I mean, that 50 properties, that's incredible. So if that's going on, if that kind of property speculation is going on, I mean, that sounds like a business to me. So if it's a business, it'll be through a limited company, and that's probably still going to happen anyway. So these measures may end up hitting the likes of you and me, who've saved for all of our lives. And you think, okay, well, instead of buying a house in Norfolk, I'm going to buy a small apartment in the Costa Blanca or something. Then it could end up. My guess is it probably won't hit the people that ideally they want to hit.
And what the rhetoric is saying from Sanchez is those are the people that he's aiming at. But you're right; it seems to be going in the wrong direction.
I think he says he wants to hit people who are buying property to speculate. And I know when I bought my home, I had hoped that you would, in the long term, it's a good investment, but you buy in it to live in it. I mean, that's not really speculation. So my guess is it will hit the wrong people. And again, if it's only going to be, it's worth mentioning that the reason Brexit is relevant here is because if you are an EU citizen, then EU laws would prevent Spain doing this to you because of discrimination rules, anti-discrimination practices. Whereas, somewhere like Mallorca, the vast majority of my neighbours are German. And so it's not going to affect them at all. So the tiny number of us who are Brits in the town where I live, I mean, I don't. Maybe this is a measure to stop Americans investing in Spain, because huge numbers of Americans are trying to get their money out of the USA, and they're looking for a life in Spain. I know it's very popular at the moment. And I don't know. Maybe a million or 2 million on a house is nothing for them. I don't know.
Maybe, and of course, by the time any of these laws come in, it's going to be 2 or 3 years down the line. There's going to be another election, and the American government could change. Yeah. So they might.
And property prices could have doubled by then, as everybody rushes to buy in the short term. To answer that question that somebody asked earlier on,
yeah,
I think it will be. I think it will double property prices in the short term, and then maybe property prices don't tend to fall backwards that far, but maybe it'll drop 25% again. I don't know.
Yeah, it is about time to have another one, isn't it? But there are regular property kind of crashes. And I'm waiting for one so I can afford a place to move into. I've been renting since we moved here, but difficult to get a mortgage these days unless you pay, 30-40%. That's what you've got to pay to get a mortgage, and I haven't got that amount of money, and unlikely to get it with a YouTube channel,
Well, I think it's really successful, and hopefully that will change. Hopefully it'll become even more successful.
Yeah, you never know. Well, I was hoping that was the plan. Certainly by retirement to have a successful channel, and then if it's successful enough, sell it, and then
I
just
think
for a
it's
lump sum.
amazing. I vaguely had these weird ideas that I should do something similar, and I look at what you do, and I'm like, look, wow, that's like impressive. It's like, ooh,
Oh, thank you.
too much work.
It's funny actually on this point about the housing plan. There, I was looking at some of the latest online headlines early this morning about Spain, and of course, there's two things dominating at the moment. There's on the one hand, it's the housing crisis and anti-tourism situation, which seem to be locked in together, and then on the other hand, there's the latest statistics about, which I made a video on a couple of weeks ago, about the record-breaking rise in tourism figures, coupled with an economic growth in Spain rivaling the US that's the envy of Europe. So, of course, and that's true, most European countries, especially Germany, which is seeing a drop, and they're the most powerful of the European economies. And the UK is still at the top of the list for visitor numbers, and more are coming to Spain each year. The percentages are going up. So Brexit on its own hasn't really changed that. It's not stopped people from coming. And tourist spending is rising too, I guess partly because prices are going up and property prices are going up. And it does kind of put paid to comments that Spain doesn't want the Brits, because obviously they do in terms of tourism. They definitely want to bring them in for short term. And I wonder what will happen to change that this year. If, with the housing plan, is that going to persuade people not to come over? I don't think it will, to be honest.
I think for the mood in our group among our members for these kind of these headlines that come up, these taxes, they're going to ban people, etc. It really does drag people down, because just putting this in context, this is a group of 8,000 people who feel very frustrated that their rights were not protected by the withdrawal agreement. So they don't feel like tourists. They don't feel like visitors. They feel like they live in Spain for part of the year. And people can argue with that as much as they like. It's how people feel. It's how people were. People sing in choirs. People are part of sports teams. When they're on the island. There's quite a social. People are often quite integrated into the community. So when they see all these kind of things coming out of Spain, and they're all amped up by the right-wing press in the UK, they get quite depressed. And I know one lady in our campaign, she's had her family, they've had property on the island, and had a home on the island, lived on the island for 20, 30 years or so, and she's incredibly frustrated by the fact that she wasn't properly protected, that they're getting rid of the golden visa things, when this came out, initial reaction was, oh, I've had enough with Spain, I'm going to just go to a country that welcomes people. And so this is the first sort of knee-jerk reaction when all these headlines come out. People do feel really despondent and disheartened. But they take a deep breath, and then they realise that actually the reason they're in the campaign is because they want to keep living in Spain. They want this to continue to be their home. Otherwise, the people that just want to sell up and go will do that anyway. So, I think those of us that would like to see this change, we're in it for the long haul. We want to spend lots of time in Spain and the community. We want to live in two places. We'd like to be treated as lawfully residing in two places, and that doesn't feel too much to ask. Nobody thinks twice when a pop star lives in two places, or has a home in Los Angeles, one in Monaco, and one in somewhere else. Why not normal people too? On a smaller scale. Is it that bad?
Yeah. I've seen some comments about people being put off coming to Spain because they or their member of their family got hit with a spray from a water pistol sitting in a cafe in Barcelona when there was a protest going past. And that's one of the places where there were big protests. And saying, don't just base your whole idea of what it's like in Spain on somebody spraying you with a water pistol. It doesn't happen every day.
I know they've been well publicised. These get the headlines, don't they, these campaigns? And I think I'm aware of about 3 protests in Mallorca, and I think they each lasted about an hour. and they were in 3 very specific locations: one beach, one in the centre of Palma, and one near the airport, something like that. They're one-off press events to raise awareness of the issue. And we go in this cycle. It's like, we want more tourists. And do you remember in the pandemic there was a campaign called SOS Turismo, save our tourism during the pandemic and all the restrictions. They wanted them to be relaxed so that visitors and tourists can come. And then the next moment you've got, we've got too many tourists, oversaturated, and then the next moment I go to, there's a big travel event near where I live here in London as well, at Excel, called World Travel Market, and I've been a couple of times. And you go there, and there are these exhibition halls with tourist boards and travel companies from all over the world. And one of the largest delegations is from Spain. You have every single region of Spain. You have Andalusia, Valencia. You even have town councils. I mean, there are about 6 town councils in Mallorca have their own stand there. And you think, well, hang on a minute, this isn't a country that wants to discourage visitors.
Yeah.
This is a country that's working really hard to encourage more visitors. So I think you can just follow the press too much on this stuff, and you've just got to keep it in perspective. But
yes,
hopefully people can do that.
Yeah. Perspective doesn't sell papers. There's a good phrase, but yeah. Well, that's what it's about.
Just write 90 or 80 days on it, and it goes straight to the top of the algorithm.
Exactly, that's the secret. Michael Stanley says, Skatz, crowdfund. Yeah, that's exactly what the GoFundMe is, all up the top there. Hover above that and do it. Maybe I should do it on the crowdfunding app and start one of those as well, and do something crowdfund specifically for something, so that people know exactly how much to donate, and then I can take hundreds rather than 10s and 20s at the same time. But thank you for, by the way.
People tell me I should really start doing the same as well with this campaign, because I spend so much of my life doing this instead of running my business, which I should be doing.
Yeah, it's a very common thing to do now. And Yogi, thanks for your donation, by the way, as always, very generous. And Michael and Yogi, stop arguing. There's a very tiny argument started up on there. Let's all get together and have a curry, and then we can talk reasonably about things like this. There you go. I know Yogi's a lovely person. I'm sure you are too, Michael. So open a conversation. That's what all of this is about, I think. And I think we'll kind of round it off on that note, rather than going into anything more negative. I mean, I suppose I had a little note at the end here and asking, is there a sense of fatigue about the subject? Is it like bashing your head up against the brick wall sometimes? How's the mood in general? Let's finish with that.
Well, I think one of the hardest things for me personally is to keep the energy going and keep the morale going amidst all of this negative press that comes out. Mm-hmm. I know every time that I put my big boy trousers on and do interviews like this, and when I go on the media, people are always really encouraged and they're motivated, and it reminds people that people are interested in this topic. Mm-hmm. So I mean, it is great to do things like this, and we're actually going to Parliament next week. We're joining a lobby group with some of the musicians that are wanting better. They're wanting to lobby for better access to Spain, an awareness thing, really, to do that kind of thing. So myself and a few people are going along to that, mainly to observe and see what we learn from the process. But we keep going, keep trying to be heard, and we are being heard. So really, I it's keeping the energy up, and we do throttle back a bit sometimes for a month or two, just to to give everybody a bit of a rest, and then when we have a new idea on how to go at MPs, we'll draft a new model letter and we'll get everybody to send that out, and then they'll go and have meetings with their MPs. And because some take a long time to reply, it does keep the energy going. We get an encouraging response from an MP, and that buoys the mood in the group. And so I don't know, the morale's good at the moment, I would say, but
Excellent.
It does feel on slog.
Well, that's a very positive answer to a quite a negative question. So thank you for that. You've turned it around. Brilliant. So do we have any more questions on the live chat before we finish? And while we're waiting for those to appear, because there is I've worked it out, a 23-second time lag before people hear what I'm talking about. So while we're waiting for those to appear, do you have any final comments, anything else you'd like to add?
I think I would encourage anybody affected by this issue, whether you're somebody who was lawfully there before Brexit, and you're looking for solutions, or if you're somebody who has moved to Spain after Brexit and you would just like to have a better mobility, to get in touch, join our campaign, look us up on Facebook. We're 180 days in Spain. Join, get involved. We'll help you write letters to your MP and suggest what you can say to them, and we'll facilitate that conversation. But we really need people who want to get involved. We need people who want to write letters. We need people who want to go and meet their MP in person, because the ones who do meet their MP, actually their MPs are interested. And I think a lot of people are discouraged. They write one letter and their MP doesn't respond or takes 3 months to reply. On average, people have to chase their MP 3 or 4 times before they get a reply. But once they do reply and exchange 2 or 3 more letters, then the MPs are getting really interested, because they are understanding the issue, and they're understanding it's not just about restoring freedom of movement of people. Yes, it's caused by the loss of freedom of movement, but they're starting to realise there are other solutions. So I'd really encourage people to look us up on Facebook, get involved, and come and find out more.
Brilliant.
And tell your friends.
Yes, absolutely. Spread the word, share it around. There was a question from Michael Stanley earlier, which I can answer very succinctly. Is the 4-year renewal of NLV proposal likely to happen? The answer is a very quick no, because that was a proposal. We've been talking about how proposals change by the time they're written into law. And by the time that one got through all of the procedures and the legal departments and negotiations in Congress and through the Senate, it turned back into 2 years again. So they're not going to request the 4-year one. It seemed like nobody agreed with it. So that's not going to happen.
So these are the November proposals that were passed that are coming into effect in May. Is that right?
No. Is it? Yes. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
That's something different.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it is under the renewals
The new
thing.
immigration law.
Yes, exactly. Chris and I are going to be talking regularly about the different changes, and I think I'll tell you about what's happening on next week's show once we've wound up this one. Oliver Dietz has another question with
That's easy, isn't it?
simple answer. Yeah, he's German, so presumably you are an EU citizen and want to become a Spanish permanent resident. Am I really only allowed to not stay 2 months in Spain each year for the first 5 years to get your permanent residency? Thank you. No, that doesn't apply to you because you're an EU citizen. It only applies to people applying for visas, like the non-lucrative visa.
It's 6 months for him, isn't it? So
yes, and once you're a permanent resident, you can go away for up to 2 years, I think it is. Although withdrawal agreement people can stay away for up to 5 years, which is interesting. So we've got extra rights for some reason. We've got,
and that's what I always say to people when people say we shouldn't ask for special treatment, because the withdrawal agreement gave that massive, massive special treatment to Brits there. So, and a lot of people haven't noticed that one. So
I keep talking about it, but nobody's kind of picked up on it very much, but there you go. Here we go then. So let's say that's all the time.
Yes, as an EU citizen, I don't think he has to worry about that at all, does he?
No, you can do what you want. You're an EU citizen. I mean, I shouldn't say it, but there are lots of
That should answer that question, Oliver.
there are lots of EU citizens
Worry about.
spend 4, 5, 6 months in Spain, on and off, or just for in a whole batch,
Yes.
and go over the 90 days
Yeah.
because, Spain doesn't really chase people out like that. Although you can kind of get round it and sort of reset the time by going out of the country for, people say a day, but I think it's safer to do it for 2 days, because if you go into any of the second day, even if you go back in at 1 second to midnight, it counts as you've arrived the day before. So yeah, and
I think this is always one of the frustrating things we've found, was that people are often, critics of what we're doing are often quick to say, but hang on a moment, all these people were living illegally in Spain unregistered for many years. And I say, well, hang on a moment, that's none of our members, because these are people who are there all year round. Well, those have been protected by the withdrawal agreement. Our members have always been either registered but staying less than 6 months of the year, or unregistered because they never had to, because they were leaving at least every 90 days, which is what Skatz was just saying there. So it's always very frustrating that the illegal ones are confused with all of our members who, sadly, have no protection whatsoever because they've been doing everything completely properly. So very frustrating.
yeah, yes, indeed. Parrot Bebop 2 flights. Does this change anything if piggybacking an EU wife? I love that term, piggybacking. It's not written down in any official regulations. I had somebody complaining saying it's not called piggybacking, it's called whatever the official title it is. It's yeah, bring it.
Well, the tax thing isn't going to affect things, providing it's all in your wife's name, because she's an EU citizen. It's not going to affect EU citizens. But
yeah,
probably can't be in your name if you're not an EU.
Yeah, if piggybacking an EU wife. Yeah, I presume you're talking about.
You must be referring to the tax.
Is it a tax one, or is it just coming over, or is it the 2 months in Spain each year for the first 5 years? I don't know what he's referring to there. Chris Lee says, that's a simple question. Can I work on an NLV? Absolutely not. Some people, especially over in America, and this was before Brexit, as it happened, even though Brexit's not affecting America, were actually working on as if they were digital nomads and working and being, for companies outside of Spain and getting away with it. But what happened is that when Brexit happened, the rules were kind of tightened up, and a memo went out to all of the consulates, presumably around the world, but especially in America, which said absolutely you do not work in the NLV on the NLV, wherever that work happens to be. You're not allowed to have work anywhere in the world. So it's all about the money that's coming in to Spain eventually. You're not allowed to have an income. So that's a blanket no on that.
Am I right in thinking though that once somebody's been in Spain for more than a year on an LLV, it was my understanding that people are able to change the type of visa that they're on in certain circumstances to enable that. So that's something you might want to look into.
It is, but what you have to do is you have to have applied for your second year of NLV in order to start an application for another one. So it's kind of, it becomes 2 years. But of course, when you apply for year 2, you apply for year 2 and 3 as well. So really, you're kind of paying for the 3 years before you can do any of that. And it doesn't necessarily make it any easier to get, for example, the self-employment visa. It makes it slightly easier to get a working visa.
That was a nightmare to get.
Yeah,
was
absolutely.
a nightmare to get.
Yeah, I mean, unless you've got to do meticulous planning.
What it would be to be an EU citizen again. I mean, if only Brexit had not happened. But how many times have I said that?
Yeah, absolutely. Getting the working visa is easier after the first year because if you apply for it, for example, straight off without coming on the NLV, if you're applying from the UK, there's only a certain number of professions that who are pleading for people from the outside, and they can't find anybody from the whole of the EU to take that job, and they've got to prove that. So it's very difficult to get a working visa under those circumstances. But once you're in Spain as a resident on the NLV, then you become you're excused from that because you're an EU resident, so you don't have to go under those rules, and it's a lot easier. You can get a job. So yes, there are things that are possible. You can even go on a student visa after you've been on the NLV for a bit, although student visas have a few slightly different rules, and I'm not up to speed with those.
Working's a really interesting topic, actually, because this often comes up. We sometimes have a little bit of a tension between some of our older members in our group are focused just on retirement, whereas I'm much younger, as there's a few grey hairs, but hopefully you can see I'm a bit younger. I'm not retired yet, and this is the point. It's like if people are living in multiple places, they need to work. They need to be able to either run a business, whether that's remotely, and so. And this is how part-year residents, and we call people part-year residents rather than visitors or second homers or holiday homers, because we want to reiterate the fact that they're not tourists, they're not just visitors, and a lot of the people in our campaign want to be able to work remotely, or want to be able to work, or just as they did legally and lawfully before Brexit, and they want to be able to file all the right tax returns and all that kind of stuff without having to go to all the hassle of getting new visas. And I always say that if when Brexit happened, they had said to every Brit living full year in Spain, sorry guys, you've got to get on a plane, go back to London, stick an application in for a visa, and only when that is approved will we let you back. And if they did that once, if they'd said that to every Brit living permanently in Spain, you've got to do that before being allowed back, there would have been outrage. Can you imagine? There would have been absolute outcry. Whereas with a part-year resident, this is what people are expected to do every single year, because they essentially lose their residency every single year, and to go back and apply for a visa that doesn't even exist. And this basically summarises the whole crux and why people are so frustrated and why people feel that they've been forgotten by politicians, mainly on the UK side. But obviously the solution probably lies in Spain as well as the UK.
Indeed. Chris Lee says, just law solicitors are advising there is a possibility you can work depending on the type of work you do from the start. Is this false news in your opinion? No, it's not false news. It's just very, very difficult. There's a very, very narrow and small number of jobs that are available on that kind of thing. And there is a list, I believe, I think it's on the UGE, which is UGE. So if you type into Google UGE-CE Spain, and that's where you apply directly for working visas, for self-employment visas, and I think there's some other ones as well. And I think there's a list on there somewhere which says the present list of sort of companies and specific employers who are looking for people. But you've got to be a specialist, you've got to be highly qualified. If you're an astronaut or a racing driver, you've got a shoe in. But and I think there are other ones high up in engineering or computing, I think, is another one. So yeah, not false news.
I think if his solicitors are giving advice, he's got to listen to them. But I always say to people, if you're unsure of the professional advice you're getting, go and get some more, because often you can get slightly different or conflicting advice from accountants and lawyers, and
you can,
and really it's our responsibility to do the right thing, and we can only be advised. So I always say to people, if you're not sure it sounds right, go and ask another lawyer as well.
Very often when
most will talk to people for half an hour, won't they? So
yeah, very often what happens is the first conversation you have with lawyers, you get the top lawyer, the guy in charge, but then it's passed on after your free consultation. Everything's passed on to a subordinate, someone who's learning the ropes and might not have the depth of information that the boss does. So it's possible they don't know everything. So yeah, double.
And sometimes the other way around, isn't it? When you've been doing something for years and the rules have changed, sometimes newer ones are more up to date with the latest rules. So I've certainly found that when I've sought advice on these things.
Absolutely. Parrot Bebop 2 Flight says we are moving over in 2 weeks. He says underneath, I'm a UK citizen. Plan to piggyback on the wife's EU status once she gets residency. Has anything changed that would make this more difficult for me to get residency? No, nothing's changed at all on that one. That's still very possible. We've done a few videos all about it, and especially with Chris. Watch some of the live shows and you can get the full advice on that, on what paperwork you need and the process. You can actually just turn up in Spain and set the residency process going, and depending on your circumstances, it's normally the EU. It is always the EU citizen who would start the process first, unless the other non-EU citizen is the one who's going to be working, in which case there's something about setting up your tax details and your social security details in order to get your health cover, your free health cover that you get when you're working, and that's got to happen first, so that when your wife applies for residency, you're covered for the health cover. Otherwise, you need to buy private health insurance. This happened with my wife and I, but the other way around, because we applied with mine first. We're both going to be self-employed. So the first thing I had to do was get an NIE number and then register with Social Security and the taxman in order to get the health number, so that I could say we've got health coverage for the both of us. And only then could I go through and it's not applying for residency, it is registering for residency, which is a different thing. But
great point there, well said.
Goody good. I'm glad I got all that right, because it was a hell of a process to start with. And we actually had an NIE appointment booked for like 2 days after we arrived, but because the car broke down, we were stuck up near Bilbao for 3 days. Ended up missing that appointment, and Chris had to do what's it called, that you normally sign with a lawyer so that they can do things for you. Yes, and he had to do a limited power of attorney for us. When we actually arrived, I had to sign all of that so that he could get the appointment, at any time of day and go to it straight away on the day without me having to drive all the way down from Granada province to Malaga, where he was. So he did all that, but it ended up being on day 89 after we arrived is when my final paperwork came through, and until that had come through, my wife couldn't apply, so she was right on the limit. So we had to do her paperwork very, very quickly, and so it was, I applied in 2021. She was in 2022 by the time she could put the paperwork through. But Chris was very, very quick on it. He knew what he was doing. So there we go. Let's just get the last final comments in before we wrap up. Mark O&L says, hi Skatz, it's Mark the drone guy. Does that mean you fly drones or you drone on and on for hours? Hopefully it's the first one. Happy in Alicante, when I can be with my partner. Where I can with my partner. Great. That's lovely. And John Carrington says, ask 5 lawyers, you get 7 different answers. Lovely. Well,
sounds about right.
We'll finish with that joke. That's brilliant. So that's all the time we have for this week. We've done an hour and a half, and that's wonderful. Make sure you click on the like button and subscribe if you haven't already, so you can be the first to know about future shows. I'll tell you in a moment who your special guest will be and what we'll be talking about next week in a moment. But first, let's give Andrew a big virtual kiss and a hug and say goodbye for now. It's been an absolute pleasure and lots of things learned, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Thank you very much. Lovely to be here again.
Excellent. So everybody give him a wave and bye for now. There we go. Wasn't that wonderful? And very eloquent words from Andrew Hesselden. Yes, indeed. So who do we have on the show next week? Of course, every 2 weeks we have Chris from Upsticks with our regular fortnightly format where we answer all of your questions. And we'll have a special feature next week. This is actually about the Brexit withdrawal agreement residents, because it is now 5 years on from 2020, when we think that about 35,000 of you who were desperately applying for residency at the time are now going to be applying for your permanent residency. And depending on whether you did it in the first half of 2020 or the second half of the 2020, when there was a different situation going on, you had to apply to a different organisation first, I think. And Chris will explain this next week. So as it's time for that to happen, it's going to be very topical and very important this year, as well as there being all of these new rules that come into law in May. So we're going to be getting ahead of the game to help you out there. And of course, we'll be having our regular Ask Us Anything and frequently asked questions segments, plus the very popular argument about something important or hilarious or both. I don't know what that's going to be yet, but you can ask questions in advance on our Facebook page and you will be answered. Thanks to all of you for joining us and leaving comments and hitting the like button and supporting us with donations. There's been 2 people who've, hovered over the GoFundMe thing there, the QR code. You can also do memberships and donations. There's a thing down there, a $sign, where you can do what Yogi did earlier on the chat and donate it on there. So donate as much or as little as you want. So there you go. And I'll see you either on the midweek video, which comes out at 6 o'clock on Wednesdays. These are Spanish times, by the way. Or, of course, live on Saturday mornings at the regular time of 10 o'clock if you're in Spain or Central Europe, which, of course, is 9 o'clock if you're in the UK, Ireland, Portugal, the Canaries. Yeah, that's about it. And that's all for this week. Someone pass around the 180-day cookies. Let's just see if there's any other comments come in. No, we're all right there. And peace and love, everybody. Peas and fluff. And here's one final message from all of the voices in my head at YouTooSpain. So goodbye for now. Where is the button I must press? I usually cut myself off at this point, but I'm not going to do that. Let's do this.
Wave goodbye, lads. Bye. Goodbye. Toodaloo. Peace and love. Peas and fluff. Oi, oi. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. One more cosmic dance. All right then. Look, Mum, I'm dancing. Oh, I'm all a quiver. Let's dance. I'm all a quiver.